I am very excited this morning to have a conversation about Nehemiah. A little while ago when Corey and I were talking, we were like, yeah, let's do a series on Nehemiah. I was like, for sure, because I totally have read it so many times. And I remember it. But since that conversation and getting into the book of Nehemiah, it's been really incredible and special. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a great book. You know when you do that, did anyone do the thing when you were younger, like read through the whole Bible in a year? So I know I skimmed it at some point. But anyways, now I'm real deep in it. And it's a beautiful book, and I'm excited for this series. So this morning I want to have a conversation about Nehemiah. I want to have a conversation about grief. I want to have a conversation about pride. And so we're going to be in the book of Nehemiah, chapter 1, verse 4. It says, when I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. So this is Nehemiah finding out about the wall and things that are happening. And something that I love about this book and about this story is that we do not rush past the grief. That the grief is observed, that the mourning has a time and a place. That there was something that he expected. There was a foundation he thought he was going to see. There was a picture in his head of how things would go. That was not what he saw. That was not what happened. And then he allowed himself for some days to mourn and to grieve. And I think that's a beautiful thing that sometimes I myself want to rush past, right? As an Enneagram 7, I'm like, yeah, I'm sad, but actually now I'm fine. And don't always give myself the time to grieve. But I think there's so much power in what comes next when we allow ourselves to mourn what we thought we were going to see or what we thought was going to happen. And obviously this is the first Sunday of Pride Month, and so I'm thinking about this a lot through my own queer experience. And it's very relatable, right? Because as queer people around our age, and I just mean like broadly, not children, my dream is for the children in New Abbey to have a different experience. But most of our experiences in this room is that we were handed sort of an idea and pictures of the way things looked and our lives might look, or the people around us wanted our lives to look, or this idea of family and marriage, and every rom-com I saw had a man and a woman, and every story I saw had a man and a woman, and all of these things happened. And then at some point when I realized something about myself, that picture changed and it didn't look like how I thought it was going to look like. And there was grief in that. Not because it was bad or wrong, but because it was so different than the thing I thought I was going to see. So now how do I build a life, and what does that look like? But it had to take time to grieve that I'm not going to have the rom-com thing that I saw or see myself on billboards and movies or all these things, right? There was just some grief in that I didn't know or understand how it could look. I just saw what I knew, and then it was different, right? And that's not completely unique to the queer experience either, because that's happened in other areas of my life, right? I remember I was 35 years old, and my parents got divorced, okay? It's okay, they were only married for 40 years, so super chill. I know. At that point, right? I'm like, just keep going. So I have this whole life of this picture of what I know my family looks like, of how I understand the way that it works in the world, and the way I exist in the world because that exists, because that structure, because that foundation, because that system is there, and then that thing changes, and there was so much grief, and there was so much mourning. We have relationships that we think will look one way, jobs that we think will look one way, experiences that we think will look, and then they look a different way, and there is grief in that, and there is mourning in that. And we have to allow ourselves to grieve that. And I think one of the reasons we have to allow ourselves to grieve it is because it's good for us and we can't hold that in, that's bad. But also, Richard Rohr says, if you don't transform your pain, you transmit your pain. Sometimes when we try to move past the grief and we try to move past the mourning, we pass it off in weird ways. We internalize it, and then we do you ever do that? You know what I mean? You haven't fully grieved or mourned something, and then you start jabbing and poking at people in kind of weird ways. Am I the only one that's ever done that? Okay. And so we have an opportunity to sit with our grief and then transform it. And in the story of Nehemiah, he grieves that this wall is torn down, and then he transforms that and starts organizing and getting everyone together and rebuilding this beautiful story. And it makes me think a lot about this book I read. I read this book called The Death and Resurrection Show. And it's not a very popular book. I had a friend recommend it to me, and he said, by the way, it's out of print, but I could send you a PDF copy that someone photocopied at a library. But by the way, some of the pages are blurry. And at the end, they photocopied their hand on it. I don't know why. So I'm like, send it over. Okay, that sounds right up my alley. And it's called the Death and Resurrection Show. It's not overly religious, but the point, the essence of the book is this idea that modern day show business is all derived from ancient shamanism. And it's really interesting because it talks about ancient shamanism, how there was sort of a formula to becoming a shaman or a healer in your community. And it was someone who had a few things. Number one, it was someone who had experienced tragedy. Someone in the community had experienced tragedy. And then they mentor under someone else who had experienced tragedy. And then they go on their own and they make a mask, right? They create something and then they come back and they put on a show, right? And so it was so interesting reading this book because one thing I realized it sort of unlocked for me is that the beauty of so much of what we get to do in our lives and in our work is take our pain and turn it into something. Turn it into art or beauty or meaning or something. I really sort of reject the idea when people say everything happens for a reason, because really wild things happen, and I don't think they happen for a reason. And I have tried to find a way to make meaning out of a lot of things in my life. Not because they happened for a reason, or I believe that they happened to me, or that everything is beautiful, but to find a way to find meaning in them because it's helpful for me as a person, as a human being. And so I know as a queer person, right, it's been incredibly healing and liberating to discover that actually all those walls that I grieved initially, that broke down and deserved grief and deserved mourning, were actually a formula for the fact that I could do that with every other wall in my life. And instead of feeling like, oh no, I'm crushed, I don't have a future, I've turned that into something where I'm like, oh my gosh, I could do anything. There's actually not a box that I have to live in. There's not actually a container that holds me in. It's the same thing with my family structure. I'm like, well, now I can look any kind of way. I can have different kind of individual relationships with these people I love. And what first felt like tragedy then now feels like freedom in a different kind of way. It's liberative and it's open. And I say all the time, there's the best thing about being queer for me is that liberation and that openness from breaking those things down and realizing that I now have the freedom to create the life and the world that I want to create. And that came through grieving and mourning, and then making meaning of it. And finding a way to recreate sort of the wall, right? The wall is, it's like, I just feel like I have wall trauma from the last election, but this is a different thing in Nehemiah. Even saying it, I'm like, he built the wall. Well, he built the wall. Nehemiah built God, he loved Jesus in a real way, wall. Let's just call it a brick structure, okay? Let's just get away from the word entirely. There was a brick structure that was beautiful. And it's so much of this book, right? I think it does mirror an experience of something being broken down, leaving a community vulnerable and exposed, and someone in that community actually mourning that experience for everyone that is there for themselves. And then, after the mourning, being able to have a vision and a future for something, what it could look like after that. And then getting everyone together and rebuilding that future together. And that is so much of the experience I want us to have in this church. If you're queer, if you're straight, I think those are the only two options. Pretty much covers it. We've all had experiences of something in our life changing and being broken down and feeling exposed and vulnerable. And the opportunity in that moment to see that, to mourn that, and then to have a vision for what comes next. So many of you, the stories that I've gotten to hear about your lives and what's going on over coffees or beers has been you rebuilding the imagination for what your life can look like in the circumstances and the rubble or the transformation that has happened. And that's incredibly beautiful and powerful. And I think that's what pride is about. I think pride, it's not just about shaking ass on a float. However, go off. Um, but I do think it's a reminder that queer people, especially, have given us all a vision of what it looks like to rebuild an imagination for who and what you can be in the world, and to be confident in that, and to share that, and for that to bring liberation to the people around you. And it's not only for queer people. It's also an opportunity for you to look at all the places in your life where you have had to rebuild and reimagine the way that it looks, and then be able to share that proudly with your community and be like, I went through that thing, and then now I'm here, and this is what it looks like, and this is what it feels like, and I want to celebrate that, and I want to show you that, because I want to remind you that although you may be looking at a broken down wall right now, there is something on the other side of that that is beautiful and restorative and regenerative and freedom. Even hearing you sharing good news this morning, right, is a moment to say, there was some rubble, there was grief, there was mourning, and then I reimagined what healing could feel like, and I feel like someone Windexed a window in my life, and you should feel so proud of that. For people in this room who, I think all the time, I was so scared. It feels far away, but also like yesterday. I was so scared to come out. I was so scared to come out. I remember telling my therapist, literally, I was like, I'm already black, I'm already a woman. I'm not doing another thing. And I didn't have an imagination for the life that I even have now. So of course I'm proud. Of course I'm proud that I made it out of that. Of course I'm proud that I now have this beautiful life with my wife, and I get to wake up to her next to her every morning, and we have this very queer life and friend group, and we made a family that doesn't look anything like a family you think it would look like. It's us and our best friend, okay? That's the family. There's no kids, there's no thing. We get to do what we get to do. We get to make the rules. And then we get to go and share that, to say we mourned and we grieved, and then we had an imagination, and then we got our community together, and this is what it looks like. And I'm just taking today and this month to be freaking proud of it, that I made it through the thing that I had to mourn. Of course I love all my queer people when I'm talking to you, and I'm also talking to not queer people. There is something in your life that you grieved, you didn't think you were going to get on the other side of, and now you find yourself on the other side of. Use that imagination to encourage your community, to get your community together and say, what if we could build a different kind of future? I said we all have experiences because we're all not kids, because I do hope that the kids at New Abbey don't spend 3 years in therapy wondering if they're going to go to hell if they come out. That I do think the walls that they are going to grieve, it'll be something, because we always mess up kids somehow, but hopefully in a different way than we were, okay? They'll be like, too much AI. We're like, well, we didn't see that coming. At least you didn't have to come out, you know? One thing at a time. In thinking about it, I just wanted us to have a moment to feel proud. Life moves so fast. And I know even for me, sometimes I get so stressed with certain things. I'm like, why is this plant dying in our house, you know? And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I live in a house with my wife, in a way that I never thought I could live before, and we have this community, we have these friends. And sometimes I don't always take a moment to stop and remember that I made it through something I didn't think I was going to make it through. And for us this morning, there are so many things happening in all of our lives. But Pride Month for me sometimes is a reminder to remember the times I didn't think I was going to make it, and then I did. And to feel so proud of how far I've come. No matter how far, I still feel like I want to go. Everyone in this room made it through so much just to be here. We grieved, we mourned, and then we turned it into something, and here we are. And I'm just so honored and proud to be in the room with you all. And I hope you feel so proud of yourselves. So take this time. Yes, we still want to go. There's so much. There's more walls to build. There's more work to do. There's more things to do. But we made it through something. We saw something changed, something transformed. We had to grieve it, and here we are. So you're going to grab the same 3 or 4 people around you and answer this question. Where can you celebrate transformation in your life? Enjoy.